Hey folks, I'm Mark Kroos. Welcome to Riffs with Mark. This is going to be a lesson series that's targeted towards improvisation. That's what we're going to be talking about. We're just going to be talking about making things up. And it'll be a little bit more conceptual in this lesson than the other ones. Primarily, I'm going to be teaching you riffs. So if we back up a little bit and just take a look at improvisation. If I say I'm going to make something up, if I go... and I say that, okay, I just made that up. Whether I'm playing by myself or I'm playing with a backing track, it's somewhat improvised. I've never done that exact combination of notes before. But a lot of the time when we improvise, it's using riffs. And riffs are little ideas and motifs. You've definitely heard the term riff before. And sometimes people talk about a riff in reference to a guitar part in a song, like the repeated figure in, for example, if we use Back in Black by AC/DC, we go... and then we got... and people oftentimes will say, oh, that's the riff of the song. Really, I would say that's the guitar part. The riff is maybe this little thing here. If that makes sense. They're little motifs, little ideas that you use, and you learn them, you get them under your fingers, and you recombine them, and you make your solos. Again, whether you're playing by yourself or you're playing with other people, it's a way to get familiar with the guitar fingerboard. So in this course, we're going to take a look at me primarily teaching you riffs, but then also where those riffs lie in your scales. Mostly going to be using pentatonic scales, or at least basing things on the pentatonic scales. Even when we get into notes outside of the pentatonic scales, I want these pentatonic shapes, which we'll be going over today just a little bit, to be your main source of what we're going to do. So first 10 minutes or so, we're just going to go over the major pentatonic scale. And hopefully you've heard of it before. Hopefully maybe you know one of the positions of it. And actually, Chris, if you would go ahead and put up the major pentatonic and blues scale theory sheet. Thank you. What we're going to do, you've heard of the major scale before. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do is the way people often think about it. This is a C major scale. In this case, I'm going C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. What we're going to do, we're going to take this major scale and we're going to build the major pentatonic scale off of the major scale. We're going to take a couple notes out. We're going to assign each note a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Now the major pentatonic scale, what that's going to do, that's going to take away the fourth, which is F in the case of C, and B in the case of the C major scale. We're going to take away F and B, the 1 and the 4, or I'm sorry, the 4 and the 7. And we're just going to get C, D, E, G, A, and then C again on top. So we get 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 1. There we go. And that's the C major pentatonic scale. Now that's not necessarily the way we're going to primarily play it for improvisation. We've got other fingerings of it as well that'll go all the way up the neck, and I'll show you those in just a second. But go ahead and familiarize yourself a little bit with this major pentatonic and blues scale theory sheet. This is really kind of just for reference. That's how you build the scale, and this is going to be our primary scale, at least this week, for improvisation. We'll get into the minor pentatonic scale a little bit next week, but for today, major pentatonic scale. So that was the C major pentatonic scale. And what we're going to do is we're going to add one note to it. So penta means 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes, and then of course the C on top. That doesn't count. It's just a doubled octave. Because what we'll do is we'll take the scale and we'll just repeat octaves over and over again. So we're going to add one note to it though, and this is going to make it the major blues scale. Okay, we had C, D, E, F. I'm sorry, C, D, E, G, A, and then C again. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 1. What we're going to do, we're going to add a flat 3. And this is going to be what we call a blue note, probably more commonly called a blue note than a flat 3 even. And so in this case, our 3, C, D, E is E flat, all right? So E flat, you either play it there or you play it there. And again, this is not going to be the main fingering of the pentatonic scale that we use. I'm just showing you how the theory behind it, how it's built and everything. So that's your major blues scale. They are two different scales, the major pentatonic scale and the major blues scale. They're not the same scale, just to clarify for anybody who's a stickler for that. But for our purposes, in terms of improvisation, we'll use them as the same thing. It'll be a major pentatonic scale. We'll really have that blue note in there if we want it, you know. So for all intents and purposes, just consider major blues scale, major pentatonic scale. Those are synonymous for the purposes of these lessons. So anyway, Chris, if you would put up the 5 positions of the major pentatonic scale, folks, you'll have a tab that you have access to if you're a Jam Play member that'll show you. But I really want you to go off of these scale diagrams. These are the 5 main positions of the pentatonic scale. This is something that you should definitely get under your fingers. All 5 of these. In the tab, if you do want to look at the tab, those are all in the key of C. And today we will only be working in the key of C. So we'll maybe talk a little bit about transposition, but that'll be in a couple weeks. We'll talk about transposing riffs, bringing them to other keys. But for now, we're going to stay in the key of C. And I'll go ahead and play each of those positions for you. This is position 4. This is position 5. Pay really close attention here because this is going to be the main position that you kind of want to learn this one first. Again, this is position 5. It is by far my favorite. This is position 1. Oh, I'm sorry. And I should mention real quick that in those scale diagrams, the R is the root note. So in this case, anytime I'm seeing an R, it's a C. All right, so that is the root note of the scale. That will be the scale that is built off of. If that R is played over, if that's where a D is, you'd be playing a D major pentatonic scale. But each of those R's, in this case, is a C. That is the root note of the scale. That is your 1 of the scale. The gray dots are the blue notes, the flat 3rd. And then all the other notes, those are either 2, 3, 5, or 6 of the scale, but just think of them as other notes in the scale for now. That'll be plenty. So anyway, that was position 1. Position 2. This is a fun one. It has a lot of blue notes in it. You get blue notes right up here and up here. And then, let's see, we called that position 2. This is position 3. Also one that I use quite a bit. And then it actually cycles back up to position 5. I'm sorry, position 4 here. Notice we started down here. Down here, and then we ended up here. You hear how that's the same position and everything. If I play a riff here, and I go, It's just up an octave. So that's the thing, is that it's continual up the fingerboard, and it's really, really cool. So what I would say is, since we have some beginners in this course, and this isn't really designed to be a strict beginner course, this is high-level beginner to intermediate to hopefully we'll get into some pretty advanced concepts as well, though maybe not in the first lesson. What I would say is, if you're very new to the pentatonic scale, this week, concentrate on getting position 5 under your fingers. That should be, and if you already know position 5, I would say really concentrate on getting all of the other positions under your fingers, at least in the key of C for now. And if you know how to bring it to other keys, go ahead and bring it to other keys, that's great, but we'll be getting to that in a few lessons. So yeah, and as well as, if you find that a riff is difficult and you just want to focus on, for example, riff 1 today, that's just fine. Go ahead and do that, because we're going to play the heck out of these riffs. We're going to take a look at the riff, and then we're going to take a look at, first of all, how to use it in improvisation, how it sounds over the backing track that's provided. But then how you can, where you find that riff in the scale, and what you can do to make that riff your own, how you can change it, how you can see the scale based around it. So let's go ahead and start in on, I was going to say let's start in on riff 1. Let me just show you a little bit of improvisation. And this is with the backing track that I have there. I'll just improvise a little bit using I'll try to use all major pentatonic / blues scale. You gotta make those faces too. And I'll try to kind of work my way up the neck too. Right now I'm in position 3. Actually, let me go back down and start in position 5, and I'll work my way up. That'll be good. I'm going to come up to position 1 now. Can you see what I'm doing there? I'm going to slide up to position 2. Up to position 3. And up to position 4. So I just used each of the pentatonic scale positions in order to improvise. Now, let's go ahead and move on to riff 1. Like I said, everything that I used there was major pentatonic scale. A lot of the time, it's really fun to borrow notes from other scales, and that's a big thing that we'll be talking about in the coming weeks. Everything will be kind of based off of either your major pentatonic scale, or what we'll talk about next week is the minor pentatonic scale, which sounds a little bit more edgy, bluesy, and everything. We're starting with the major pentatonic because I feel like it's the easiest to get into theoretically, and it's actually the one that I use more. So, riff 1, let's go ahead and get into it. It sounds like this. You can play it as slow or as fast as you want, but it starts in position 5. We'll go ahead and get it under your fingers. It's, start at the 8th fret of the E string, high E string, pull off to the 5th fret, 8th fret of the B string to the 5th fret of the E. Now you're going to do 7th fret of the G and slide up to the 9th. And when you do that, you're sliding into position 1 of the pentatonic scale. You're in position 1. And then second measure of it, you hit that 9th fret again, you're in position 1, slide back down to position 5. Then pull off, and that's your riff. There's something I think I'd like to clarify here, and that is that note right there, that 5th fret of the E string, I hybrid pick that note. I don't use the pick for every note. But you can. I've been taking the Andy Wood jam play course actually, and he does a lot of hybrid picking, so that's really gotten under my fingers a lot. I'm using it for other things. So if you want to hybrid pick that note too, the 8th fret of the B string, or if you want to play it all with your pick, that's just fine. It's a little bit country sounding and everything, so hybrid picking is not a bad thing there. So that's the riff. Like I said, if you're a beginner, go ahead and get that under your fingers. If you're pretty advanced, let's kind of move on. So that was figure 1.1. Move on to figure 1.2. We won't spend a lot of time on this, but this, I'm going to take that same riff, I'm going to bring it up to the key of D. Okay, so that's up 2 frets where the root note is here now. All right, so that's the key of D. Now let's bring it down to A. All right, so the root note of the scale, if you're in position 5, I'm in A. Again, not going to spend a lot of time on this. We'll go right back to C in a second, but so you're going to be able to take this riff and bring it around to different scales eventually and everything. And by this riff, I mean every riff. But for now, let's go ahead and bring it back to C. And what I would do is I'll go ahead and play the backing track, and I'll play the riff over the backing track so that you can hear how to use it. But what I would do, I'll actually go ahead and get started now. What I would do is play the scale, okay? And then start to improvise with the scale. Now I'm playing 8th notes right now. If we are going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 8th notes are 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So I'm just gonna play some notes in the scale at 8th notes. And then I'm gonna throw the riff in. That was riff 1 right there. Okay, now that's the way I would do it, is I'd kind of get working around the scale and everything, and really then be able to visualize, the riff there within the scale. That's part of the reason I really like the scale diagrams over the tab, because it it's that visual aspect of really seeing it there on the fingerboard. Oh, the other thing I was going to say about this is I was just playing it in 8th notes, and I'll go ahead and do that again. Okay, so that was played in 8th notes. And also, you don't actually need to start on beat 1 if you don't want to, but that's a whole nother thing. You can also play any of these riffs in 16th notes, and that's going to sound a lot faster. It'll be more like, oh, I'm sorry, I messed that up. Let's try again. So that would be in 16th notes. 8th notes are do 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 do. 16th notes da 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 da. You can think of it as being twice as fast. It is. That's what it is. Is you're playing it twice as fast at double the speed. So anyway, that is how you play that riff in position 5. Now we're going to take a look at 2 other ways to play the exact same riff. And this may seem weird and redundant, but it's really, really important for recognizing that whether you're playing the pentatonic scale here, or you're playing it up here, it's the same 5 notes plus a blue note that you're doing as you're doing down here. Let me just kind of demonstrate. I'm going to play something. I'm going to go, okay, I played that there. I'm going to play it here. I'm going to play it here. I'm going to play it in a lower octave. And I'm going to play it in a higher octave. The beautiful thing about the guitar is that you can take just about anything and play it in different ways on the fingerboard. And by learning these riffs, or any riff that you learn in different places on the fingerboard, you're going to see it in different positions in the scale. And it's going to help you to learn the fingerboard better. That riff is also just going to be so much more accessible for you because you can't just you don't just need to be in position 5 to use it. Let me show you what we're talking about. So once again, this is riff 1. Now if we look at figure 1.4, this is riff 1, but it's going to be played in position 2, sliding up to position 3. So remember, we were in position 5, sliding up to position 1. Watch this. Okay, so that's me playing the riff in figure 1.4. It's the same exact riff. Remember, it sounded like this. Now it sounds like exactly the same, but you're now in a different fingering of the pentatonic scale. You're in position 2. Now what I'm going to do is, if we take a look at figure 1.5, that's going to be riff 1, the same exact riff, but I'm going to play it in a lower octave. Kind of cool, right? Now, this isn't necessarily, those aren't necessarily the only places that you could play it. Those were the ways that I found worked the best, and I didn't want to overload you too much, but those are the ways that I would focus on getting it under your fingers. You'll notice that it's not the same exact shape every time, you know, so it'll be good for your fingers. It'll be good for learning the getting a feel just for the way the guitar fingerboard works. That's really what we're doing here, and it makes it very accessible in these different positions as well. So that's riff 1, and we've got a little bit more to do with it. So the other part of this is I can give you riffs and everything, and I don't care if you use these riffs in your own improvisation. I don't care if you record them, whatever. They're free, you know, you go ahead and use them. But you're going to feel better about it if you make it your own. If you say, okay, well, I'm going to start the riff like Mark did, but maybe I'm going to end it like, instead of, I ended that, which is figure 1.6. This is riff 1, and it has an alternate ending. It's back in position 1, or I'm sorry, back in position 5. And then we end up in position 1 here. Okay, so, and that's just one way we could end it differently. You can go ahead, I think the goal here is to get you these riffs, teach them to you, but then show you ways that you can go ahead and make them your own. And I was going to say that's improvisation, but really that's composition. If you go ahead and you take the riff and you compose it differently and you get that under your fingers, eventually you will be able to just make things up, make up original riffs right there on the spot. And it's so much fun. It's a blast. But it really helps if you're new to improvisation to start with learning some ideas that somebody else gives to you. So that was figure 1.6. Let's do that again. Sorry about that. Okay, so, and notice when we do that, when we go up into position 1 there, using those blue notes right down the scale. Pull off, pull off. So check that out. Give that a shot. If we take a look at how we could use riff 1 in the lower octave, but maybe end it a little bit differently. It's going to go like this. And sorry, this is position. This is in position 4. I'm sorry, I don't usually actually think about the numbers of the positions, but it is position 4. So this is how we played it in that lower octave. This is figure 1.7. But I'm going to end it a little bit differently, okay? This is figure 1.7, I should say. So I'll do that again. Oh, and we go all the way up to position 1 when I did that. So that's just another way that we could end this riff, a way that you could change the riff, edit the riff, make it your own, you know? And the possibilities are endless. I mean, just off the top of my head, if we were to go... That's another way we could end it. You don't need to go through 4 different positions of the scale to do that. I mean, if we did something a little more simple... And you'll notice, you'll probably notice that I don't think any of these riffs just stay in one position. Sorry, I really find that sliding between the positions, sliding the hammer-ons and pull-offs really help bring the riffs to life a lot. And so when I write the riffs, I think it's a lot more fun to change positions and show how they connect, because that's such a really, really important part of this. Again, if you're new to improvisation, if you're a very beginner, learn the riffs and everything, but in your own improvisation, primarily focus on position 5, at least for this week. Awesome. So what do we have next? We have the other way that I played this. If you want to look at figure 1.8, it's the way I played riff 1 in this position, just starting in position 2. But I edited it a little bit. It really just starts the same, is all. And then it goes... And we got that, what you call a double stop, those 2 notes being played at the same time. On the 10th fret there. And what that is, I always feel like bends look awkward in tab and notation. So what you're doing there is you're going at that 12th fret bend, you bend it up to the blue note in the scale, okay? Because in position 2, we're going right there, there's that blue note. You're bending that note on the 12th fret up to the note that's the 13th fret. And then you take advantage of that blue note on the low E string there. So, of course, position 2 is right here. Oh. And then the riff is here. Oh. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's the last variation that I have of riff 1. And we're not necessarily going to go that in depth with every riff that we do in this course, but I want you to see the possibilities of what we can do. So anyway, we've gone 30 minutes. We got 2 more riffs to go through. They'll probably go pretty quick, right? So, Chris, is everybody are we hanging in there, Chris? figure 1.8. This is a different riff.
Hey folks, it looks like we're having a little trouble with Mark's feed. We're going to be trying to get that back here as soon as we can, so just hold tight, please.
So that's just an example of another thing that you can do with the riff. If you like the ascending descending pattern or whatever, you can take it and really make it your own by actually playing different notes of the scale. All right, not just playing it in a different position, but playing different notes altogether. So I'd ask you with that, I only have it set up in that position in the tab. It's a completely different riff. This week, if you're if you're intermediate to advanced player, can you take that and can you play it in different places on the fingerboard? And I'll go ahead and leave that up to you. Well, I'll go ahead and show you. I think you can go. I was a little clumsy there. There's a place that you could do it an octave lower. I'll leave the rest up to you with that one. Chris, are you lost? You guys lost the feed. Are you? What was the last thing I talked about? Okay. Let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and go right into figure 1.8. Okay. If you take a look at figure 1.8, and I believe that's where the feed probably dropped, you. Okay. If you want to take a look at figure 1.8, no, sorry, 1.9, my bad. Feed dropped, threw me off, blaming that, excuses. But figure 1.9, go ahead and take a look at that. And what that's going to be is it's going to be the same exact rhythmic and ascending and descending pattern as riff 1, but they're completely different notes. In riff 1, the notes went C, A, G, A for starters. But in this, it's going E, D, C, D. But you hear how it sounds a lot like riff 1. And so what I would say is, while you can take a riff and you can bring it to different positions on the guitar fingerboard, you can also take that riff and you can use the same pattern, but then move it to maybe a different notes in the scale and really make it your own. So what I would say for your homework this week is, if you like that riff in 1.9, find different places to play it on the fingerboard. And what can you do to make it your own? I mean, I'll show you. You can play it in a lower octave here. Oh, I'm sorry. Wrong riff. It sounds so similar to riff 1 that I accidentally just played riff 1. But you'll notice that's not in the tab. You'll have to use your ear to figure that one out. But I just played this. Figure 1.9, I played it down in position 5. I had played it up in position 2. And I'm sorry, down in the lower octave, it was position 4. I played it in position 2. I'm sure that didn't sound confusing at all. So take a look at that, see if there are different ways you could end the riff, really make it your own. Let's go on to riff 2. I don't know that we're going to get through all 3 of the main riffs this week. We may just do the first 2. For each week, primarily, we're going to shoot for doing 3 riffs, I think. Especially if we can bring down the amount of concept material that I do each week, the more I can just teach you riffs. That's more what we're interested in, is teaching riffs, where they lie in the scale, what you can do with them, and everything. So if we move on to riff 2, riff 2 sounds like this. And it is going to start in position 1. Those of you who are just like learning position 5 this week, go ahead and take a look at the upper part of position 1 too. Learn this riff. If you don't really work it into your improvisation, it's okay. Get it under your fingers though. I think it's a fun little riff. I may have stolen it from Andy Wood. I don't know. It kind of sounds like something I might have gotten from his course. But you're starting in position 1 here. Oh. Sorry if I seem clumsy with the lower part of that scale. I wanted to make sure I'm playing it to keep the same as your diagram, to be consistent. That's the word I was looking for. Consistent with your diagrams. Position 1 up in the upper part of it. So you're going to start with the 8th fret of the 3rd string, and then jump up to the the 8th fret of, you start with the 8th fret of the 3rd string, slide into the 9th fret, and then jump up to the 8th fret of the 1st string. And then you've got a chuck there, just a dead note where I mute the string. If you don't like that, or if it's clumsy, so what I'm doing, I'm just muting the 3rd string and I'm picking the 3rd string before I move on. It's kind of like chicken picking. That's really what we're doing. I'm hybrid picking that note up there. Yeah, we're doing some chicken picking here. And if you don't like that, because remember, you don't have to play these riffs the way I'm showing you. Like, it's perfectly fine. Edit it. Make it your own. Go. If you prefer that, just go ahead and play the 9th fret of that again. But I really like that muted note. And then 10th fret of the B string. Pull off into the 8th fret to the 9th fret of the 3rd. And then you'll hit the 10th fret of the D string, slide up 2 frets, pull off. And I have you doing a double stop there as well. So that's going up into position 2 from position 1. And that's going to be the main way that you focus on playing that riff. But this, actually, I guess if you're very new to the pentatonic scale, and we really want to have you looking at position 5, go ahead and take a look at figure 2.2, where that's going to be actually starting in position 5/4. You're using position 5 and position 4 to play the same exact riff. Remember, it sounded. Now you're going to go. And again, for you beginners, it may be a little bit better to use 2.2 for riff 2. And again, with whether you play it in position 1 or you play it down here, what I'm doing is I'm thinking, okay, position 4 is right here. Position 5 is here. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at those positions on the guitar. And remember, I've been doing this for 20 years. I mean, I've been playing pentatonic scales for 20 years, so it's very, very easy for me to see these shapes on the guitar. I always see these shapes on the guitar. Even when I'm using things like the Lydian dominant scale to improvise, stuff like that. I'm kind of still basing it off of these 5 major pentatonic shapes, minor pentatonic shapes if it's a minor kind of mode or scale. So in that situation, position 5, position 4, and that riff 2, it's right in there. I'm looking at it, I'm looking at the scale around it, and I see it. And, again, if you want to just go play it with the backing track. Go. And once again, I'm going along in the scale. And then I play the riff. And that's how it would sound over improvisation. Maybe I play riff 1 first. Doodle a little more. And this is the very beginning of improvisation. So, Chris, and actually, I'm sorry, we'll go ahead and we'll do Q&A in just a second, but we'll go ahead and take a look at figure 2.3, which is riff 2, but with a potential alternate ending. And it goes like this. So instead of going, we're extending it a little bit more. And we'll go, we once again slide up to position 2. But we extend that a little bit more with a little bit of hammer-ons, pull-offs. Again, there are many other different things you could do. You could go. And that's improvisation, just making something up from something that you already know. And that's the whole purpose of these riffs. Chris, it sounds like we have 2 questions. Why don't we go ahead and cover those questions, and if they go quickly, we'll get into riff 3. If they don't, we'll save that for another time. So what do you have, Chris? Oh, this is a wonderful question. Thank you for asking. Why use the pentatonic rather than the full major scale? Every note of the pentatonic scale is going to sound good over every chord. That's the reason we start improvising with the pentatonic scale. You could also argue that that's just what everybody does. If you listen to rock music, just about most solos that you hear are going to be based on either the major pentatonic scale, which is what we talked about this week, or the minor pentatonic scale, which is what we'll talk about next week. But really, at the end of the day, the reason it sounds rock and roll, or in this case, honestly, with the major pentatonic scale, I like my improvisation to sound a little bit more country. Like that's my personal preference, my personal flavor. So I really like the major pentatonic scale. Minor pentatonic scale does tend to sound more rock and roll. The good news is any of these scales, any of these riffs that I'm teaching you in the major pentatonic scale can also be played in the minor pentatonic scale. But we'll maybe talk about that a little bit next week. You'll find out they really look almost exactly the same. But really, and I want to demonstrate this as well, the answer to that question of why use the major pentatonic or the major blues instead of the full major scale. The notes that we took out of the major scale to make the major pentatonic scale, the 4 and the 7, you really got to use those pretty delicately. And I'll show you that in a second. The other thing, too, is for whatever reason, a lot of major scale improvisation just sounds like you're playing the scale. Like, I find it pretty hard to use the straight up major scale, which is what we base so much of music off of. It's so much of it is based off of the major scale, but for whatever reason, it's hard to really use to improvise. Let me show you something real quick over the backing track. I do want to mention with the backing track, this is a 12-bar blues in the key of C, okay? And there should be some sheet music provided as well. I mean, it's very simple. It goes C, and then F, and back to C, G, F, C. But really, you can just use the entire major pentatonic scale over the entire thing. I will mention you can't do that with every 12-bar blues. If you see a 12-bar blues with sevens next to the chord, like C7, F7, you've got to look at a little bit of scale switching or use the minor pentatonic. Again, we'll talk about that next week. But these, it's just a C chord, just an F chord. You're good to use the major pentatonic over it. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to play the backing track a little bit, and I'm going to kind of demonstrate that answer. So I'll play the major pentatonic scale, or the major blues scale. Now I'm going to throw some notes of the C major scale in there. For example, that's the 4 right there, and this is the 7, okay? I'm going to play the 7 over this blues chord. It's okay, there's nothing wrong with it, it's alright. But if we played over this F chord, not great. Like, it's really not great. That's the 7 of the scale, that's one of the notes that we removed. And likewise, if you take the 1 chord and you try to play the 4 over it, you really want to play that note, the 3 over it instead. So that's why the major scale, it's a little harder to improvise with. Whereas the major pentatonic scale, every note you play is going to sound pretty good over any chord. So I hope that answers the question. Maybe it was a little long-winded, but I got really excited about the question. It was a really good one. So what's the point of playing something the exact same octave, but in a different position? Yeah, ease of access, tone, both of those, actually. I hadn't even really thought about tone, but that's definitely very, very relevant, is the tone that you play, and it's very, very subtle. But if I play this riff here versus, or if I do like I did earlier in the lesson, and I go, you may have heard that each of those, I was playing the exact same notes, but they sounded different. The tone was different on the different strings. The wound strings have a different tone there than an unwound string. Those are a G. Both of those notes are a G, but they sounded a bit different because of the tone. Now, as far as ease of access, yes, that is the main reason, is ease of access. But also, it is maybe a little bit more of an exercise than some people might want it to be. And I understand that it might seem like a lot of effort to learn riffs in different positions. But maybe even a better way to look at it is to do that and then really focus on one position and say, okay, we've got them in these different positions, but this is the one I really like. You know, this is the one that I really, really like. I didn't really like it when we played it in position 2. Can I play it in position 5? How does that sound? How does it feel under my fingers? Because when you're starting improvisation, at least, you're going to really want to stick with what you're comfortable with and then gradually push your boundaries and everything. Find those positions. You might find, for example, you might have noticed that I fumbled like the lower part of position 1 a little bit when I played it. And that's because I rarely ever use the lower part of position 1. I just don't use it very much. I use the upper part of it a whole bunch. I love this part of the scale. And also, position 2 is kind of wonky in the middle. Like, it's great up top, But like in here where you've got this stretch there, it's awkward. It's offset and crazy. And you know, the lower part of it is great. But yeah, there are definitely parts of different positions that I don't use as much. So learning these riffs in not only or in different positions and everything, it's a matter of also just building your ear. And that's where it's an exercise. I can't get around the fact that it's in some ways it's just an exercise to get you better at different parts of the scale and everything. It is good for you, I promise. Next question. Are you thinking about scale tones when you improvise, or is it now automatic for you? So I would actually say, so first of all, yes, it is. I think about scale tones probably more than I should. I talk to other guitar players, and well, actually, I guess when you say scale tones, some people might think of the letter of the scale of the note that you're playing. Like, for example, if am I going D, D sharp, E, G, A, C? No, I never think in note names. I absolutely never think in note names while improvising, I should say. You know, I think about note names, never in improvising. When I do actually think about specific scale tones, though, in the sense of what I call scale degrees, meaning the numbers of the scale. Using the pentatonic scale, like I said, you can primarily get away with any note over any chord if you're using the pentatonic scale, really. And it depends. There may be a song, you might be playing a song where the pentatonic scale won't actually work. But if you're looking at our backing track for this week and everything, like every note of the major pentatonic scale will work over any chord over that backing track. So if you just put on a song, which I'd like to get you guys doing as well, put on a song and you improvise over it. A good song like Sweet Home Alabama. If you want to take Sweet Home Alabama and use the D major pentatonic scale over the entire thing, you'll be good. Like, you'll be just fine. That's D major pentatonic though, not C. For this week, all I have for you is the backing track and saying C major. But yes, I am thinking a lot of the time about scale degrees that I'm playing. I do know when I hear a chord in the scale, I know, oh, that's the 5 chord. You know, I know that's the G chord or that's the F chord, and I know what scale tones are going to sound best over that. And I can sort of demonstrate a little bit of targeted tone practice this week, but I'm going to go outside of the scale a little bit. Just I'll play one chorus of this. And this is me thinking about scale tones. I'm playing the 3rd there because I know that's good in the C major chord. There's the 3rd again. Now I'm going up to the 6 here because I know that's going to be good over that F chord. Back to that 3rd of the C major chord. The 2 is going to sound good over that G chord. I hope that kind of makes sense a little bit, but that's all going on in my head and everything when I improvise. Yeah. Chris, do we have any other questions at all? Or Chris, do you have any questions for me? I don't know if Chris is there with his guitar in front of the computer and everything. I hope this kind of thing is making sense to everybody. Let's go ahead and take the last 5 minutes and just take a look at Riff 3.1. I don't think we'll get through all of the different ways of playing it, but you might be primarily on your own for this one, but let's go ahead and get you through Riff 3.1. Now, I would like you to take a look at the fact that I wrote this in 16th notes. So 8th notes, if you're going do, 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 that's a quarter note, 3, 4. That's about the tempo of our backing track. 8th notes are 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 16th notes are 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a. It's a lot to count out, but you go like that. So that's the way I wrote this. This can also be played as 8th notes instead. So let me go ahead and play it for you. And I'm going to do it at a slower tempo. that's more of like a 16th note kind of feel. But you could do that. You do it in eighth notes, but you start in position 5, of course. And you go up this setup, that little chromatic run, which is probably my favorite little part of the scale right there. Frets 5, 6, 7. And I really like to hammer on those. It's like that riff in Sweet Home Alabama. It's that part of the scale right there. And you hit these 2 notes at the 5th fret. 7th fret, pull off to the 5th fret. 7th fret, slide up to the 9th fret. Now you're in position 1. Oh, sorry. Position 1. Then back to the 9th fret, slide down. Oh. Sorry, I misspoke. I said to the 9th fret, to the 7th fret, and slide down. And then 7th fret of the D string. And then you end up in position 5 down there. And sorry, that's actually a pretty awkward, I guess maybe I wrote that to challenge myself or something, but I want to go like that every time, but it's good practice to use that blue note. You'll find that of the notes in this scale, the blue note is going to sound the edgiest. Now next week, we're going to take a look at the minor pentatonic scale. And that's a situation where the entire scale is going to sound really, really edgy. And you might find that you like it better than the major pentatonic scale. I personally like the major pentatonic scale as far as the way I like to base things in my own improvisation. But the minor pentatonic is going to really give that edge for everything. For now, you get that edge by using that blue note a lot. I'll go ahead and demonstrate just a little bit. And I'm really going to hang on that blue note a little bit. I mean, you hear that there. There's the regular third. There's the flat third, that blue note. And one thing you can really focus on doing there is hang on that flat third and then resolve it to the major third. And it's a matter of throwing in a lot of tension and then really easing up on the tension when you resolve. So, folks, hopefully that makes sense. Again, take a look. If you don't know your major pentatonic scale shapes in every position, really look at doing that this week. Really look at getting that down. Now, we have one more question. Go for it. Go for it, Chris. But really make sure that you get down your pentatonic scale fingerings. They'll come in very handy for when we move them to the minor pentatonic next week. But then learn the riffs, see how you can make them your own. Practice improvising just a little, like just whatever you can do over the backing track, and work those riffs in as well. So Steve Hudson asks, I've heard lots of, I'm sorry, my computer's a little ways away. Oh, you've heard that it's good to leave the scale sometime to get some dissonance. Yes. Yes, it is. That is a great way to get dissonance. Some people call it playing out, when you really, really take it to an extreme. Maybe I can demonstrate that a little bit. But what you are essentially doing is to leave the scale a little bit to get some dissonance. You're talking about exactly what we're talking about when we say to use that flat third. Because remember, the flat third is not in the major pentatonic scale. It's a note that we've added, and we're kind of calling the major blues scale and the major pentatonic scale. We're kind of calling it this, like using it as the same thing. But really, that flat third is not in the major pentatonic scale. So when you hit that flat third, you are going outside of the scale. So you're right there, Steve. You're using a note outside of the scale to get some dissonance. I'll show you something real quick, and that's using a I'll use a diminished arpeggio over the F chord here, and that's going to really give us some dissonance. I'm going over the C chord, now over the F chord. You heard how we really got some dissonance over that note there and went into the 5, but that's for a lesson farther ahead. But that's using a note like really outside of the scale to create dissonance, and then resolution. The thing about creating dissonance is you've got to make sure that you resolve it properly, and that's good use of it. But folks, thank you so much for tuning in to Riffs with Mark. It has really been a pleasure. I hope to see you all next week, and yeah, thanks for being part of Jam Play. This has really been a lot of fun so far. Something I've wanted to breathe into existence for a while. Very, very excited to do this. So y'all take care.